So, good morning. I am this today's class will be a little shorter than usual. I'm still in Brooklyn, Crown Heights, Brooklyn, traveling back later on to Florida, and so I'm not in a sort of regular setting environment and access to some of the material that I usually have for sharing class. But Torah learning never ends, as we used to hear in camp. And Torah must go on. So I want to share with you a meaningful Chassidic story, which is related to the Parsha, and a little sort of Kabbalistic insight of a reincarnation story that also has to do with the Parsha. I don't have my coffee here in front of me, so you guys are welcome to, of course, have your coffee and say it in the presence of someone else so they could answer Amen. I already gave my tzedakah today, my charity. I don't have the usual charity box over here, but you have, of course, encouraged you to put a coin into the tzedakah pushka, and in that merit, may Hashem grant us success in today's Torah learning. So, this coming week is Parshat Yisro, the Parsha, the portion of Jethro, the father-in-law of Moshe, of Moses. We're coming from the portion of Beshalach, where at the beginning of the portion says, Vahi Beshalach Paro, it was when Pharaoh sent out the Jews, talking about the exodus of Egypt. And it's interesting that, just to mention this briefly, that the portion we just read yesterday starts with Beshalach Paro Sa'am, when Pharaoh sent the people out of Egypt, and it ends with the war against Amalek, who came and wanted to annihilate the Jewish people and has become the symbol of all those who want to annihilate the Jewish people and do harm to the Jewish people, which is why the Torah says, Zachor, remember what Amalek did to you. Today's Hamas murderers are also referred to often as Amalek. So it's interesting that in last week's portion, we read both about Amalek and remember what Amalek did to you, as well as the defeat of Amalek. May we merit that today's Amalek, that has one goal and one goal only throughout the world, to harm and to kill Jews, that they should be totally defeated. And may we also merit the exodus of every single Jew of the current Egypt they are in. Sometimes we might forget that there are still 136 hostages being held in the worst possible conditions, mentally, physically, emotionally, with constant fear, who knows what kind of harassment and torture. So in the merit of the portion of the week that we just read, may it be Beshalach Paro, as evil as Pharaoh was, he sent the Jews, the Hebrews, the Israelites out of Egypt. May it be so immediately with every single last hostage that's being held by these murderers. Let's move on. Parshat Yisro, the beginning of the portion, talks about the fact that Yisro, Jethro, the father-in-law of Moses, is coming to the desert. He's bringing his family. And in the Torah, and again, I don't have a Chumash in front of me, so in the Torah it says, Ani chotencha Yisro, I, the father-in-law, your father-in-law Jethro is coming, and I have your wife, my daughter Tzipporah, and her two children. I just want to give a quick insight here, a quick sort of Kabbalistic reincarnation insight, that the Arizal, the famous Arizal, one of the sort of fundamental commentaries on the teachings of Kabbalah, of Jewish mysticism, says that Ani chotencha Yisro, I, your father-in-law Jethro. Yisro is an acronym. If you take the words Ani and chotencha and Yisro, so it makes up the word Ochi, which means my brother. And the Arizal, as he does with many of the stories in the Torah, shows the way the souls of previous generation came down again to correct, to fix, or reconcile that which has sins and misconduct or problems from a previous generation, and he explains it in many stories of the Torah, and even in this story, there's a lot. But I just want to share one part of it, one point of this Arizal. It says, Achi, he says the following. We all know the story of the beginning of creation, when God created Cain and Hevel, Cain and Abel, and Cain went ahead and he killed Hevel. He killed his brother Abel. And I'm sure you're all familiar with the story. I'm not going to go into details. What you don't know is that the Medrash, who often gives us the story behind the story, tells us, why did Cain kill his brother Abel? Now, the Torah gives us the sort of the more literal story, and which is, of course, 100% true, but there's a story behind the story. An additional reason for jealousy between Cain and Abel, believe it or not, because it's alluded in the Torah, and it's pretty obvious that there were also girls born, meaning when Cain and Hevel were born and created, there was twin sisters that was born with them. The Torah doesn't tell us about this explicitly because the Torah relates, it's not a history book, it's a book that tells us those parts of the Torah which are important for the story it wants to tell. But it's kind of obvious that there were also daughters that were born, because then who did Cain marry and how did he have children? So, so the Torah alludes to by saying es Cain, the es Hevel, that by adding that S, that with Cain and with Abel was born a twin sister. And like the old story that keeps on repeating itself, Cain was jealous and wanted to marry the twin sister of Hevel, which he wasn't given. He wasn't allowed, or he wasn't given the opportunity to marry his, Hevel's or Abel's twin sister, which was another reason that he killed his brother Abel, or Hevel. I'll just stick to Hevel, the Hebrew proper pronunciation. So in doing so, that was the cardinal sin, of course, that was committed. And the Arizal continues to tell us that Jethro, was a reincarnation of Cain. His soul was the souls of Cain. And by giving his daughter to Moshe, says the Arizal, Moses was a reincarnation of Hevel, of Abel, Hevel. And he explains various things based on this Kabbalistic inner insight of the mission of Moses and the interaction between his father-in-law and him. First, as we're about to explain over here, is that Jethro, how did he rectify or correct the terrible sin of his soul, again, being a reincarnation of Cain, is by taking his daughter, and Arizal says his daughter was a reincarnation of Abel's twin sister that he sort of coveted and killed for, and by taking his daughter, a reincarnation of Abel's twin sister, he went ahead and gave him to Moses. And that's why Ani choten chayisro is how the verse identifies Jethro, that he says, I am your father-in-law, Jethro, which is an acronym for the word Achi, my brother. Jethro is alluding to the fact that Moses is his brother in terms of a soul level. His soul being that. Jethro is a reincarnation of Cain, and Moses is a reincarnation of Hevel. So I'm bringing this girl back to you for you to marry, and for you to then fulfill the mission of taking the Jewish people out of Egypt. And now they're already out of Egypt, but because this is later after he already married, and now leading them towards the promised land. This was all part of the journey and rectification of these souls starting from the beginning of creation. So there's always a deeper insight. There's a deeper insight to the journey of your soul. And Arizal says, many times we don't know on a conscious level what is the journey of our soul based on previous lives and its journey in a previous lifetime. But, says the Arizal, one of the ways of knowing what is your journey or what is your mission, what is your purpose, is by seeing what it is you find most difficult for you to do. If there's something that you have an extra challenge in doing, we're talking about a mitzvah, something good, something positive, something holy, and you find a lot of opposition to it in being able to do so, that is a sign that that is part of the purpose and mission of your soul, and a rectification that you have, that your soul has traveled back down based on a lacking or a more than just a lacking wrongdoing from a previous life. So that's a little insight. It's a known insight. I might have shared it in the past on one of the classes over here from the beginning of the parsha. Now I want to also share a Chassidic meaningful story. Okay. This week we read about the Ten Commandments, the giving of the Ten Commandments. On a larger sort of scale, the Ten Commandments, as the Talmud tells us, encompasses within it the giving of the entire Torah. When the Jews received the Torah at Mount Sinai, the Ten Commandments was not just the Ten Commandments. It tells us, again in the Talmud and in many places, that this represented, and more than just represented, it encompassed within it the entire giving of the Torah, both the revealed and hidden Torah, for all of generations. Even the Talmud even says a statement, Kol ma shetalmid vosig osad l'chadash, whatever, any proper holy commentary shares with us throughout history was already given to Moses at Mount Sinai. So let's move on. I want to close over here. I apologize. I want to shut down the messages so it doesn't disturb us. Okay, the noises. Okay, so let's continue over here. So I want to share a Chassidic story. Chassidic stories always have a beautiful sort of warmth and deeper message to it. So the story is told about this Chassidic Jew. I don't remember his name, so let's give him a name. What should we call him? Any suggestions? What should we call him? We will call him Reb Velvel. Okay, Reb Velvel. Reb Velvel was a Chassidic Jew, a Chabad Chassid, who used to travel, if I remember correctly, to the third Chabad Rebbe, who was known as the Tzemach Tzedek. He was a grandson of the Alter Rebbe, the first Chabad Rebbe. And every single year, he used to make a pilgrimage from his city or town up to the city of Lubavitch, which was the headquarters of the Chabad movement at the time. And he would do so by foot. Why did he do so by foot? Even though he could rent a wagon driver, a balagala, a wagon driver, and travel to Lubavitch. But in his love for this special journey that he would take every single year, he said, I don't want to give this mitzvah to a horse. I want to go ahead and do this journey by foot because it's so dear to me, and I want to use every bit of energy of my own invested in this special pilgrimage. And so this is what he did every single year. Don't know exactly how long the travel would take him, but he would travel by foot, whether it was a couple of days. It wasn't so uncommon for people to take that kind of journey those days. And he would travel up to Lubavitch. And he was coming of age. It got more difficult, but he was determined. And he would still do so by foot. One year, he's traveling by foot, and a major storm develops, and he's heading to Lubavitch. But the storm was a real strong, early snowstorm, apparently. And it got to him. He was an older man. Storm was a strong storm. And he couldn't continue. He sits down and he says to himself, fine, if this is where I have to give my soul back to the Creator, I'm ready. What could be a better place than my journey to my holy Rebbe, my teacher? If it's my time to go, I'm ready. I'm ready to return my soul to the Creator. And as he's making peace with the situation, starting to say his prayers, he hears from a distance a horse and wagon approaching. So he says, okay, apparently I might still have another chance And he sees, the horse comes, they pull up near him, he gets up with whatever energy he has left, he waves his hands, and sure enough, there's some peasant, some Russian peasant that was traveling to Lubavitch, and he said, fine. He said, if you take me to Lubavitch, I will pay you, and could you please do so? And the guy said, sure. He says, look, I have place in the back of my wagon. I'm carrying barrels of vodka that I have to deliver. In between the barrels of vodka over there, you're welcome to find a spot. Climbs on to the wagon, and he's shivering. He's freezing. He's so cold. He says to the fellow, he sees, barrels of vodka all around with spigots. He says to his wagon driver, he says, I'll be glad to pay you, but is it okay if I take a little bit of the vodka, fill myself a cup or two to warm my soul? The guy said, sure. If you want to go ahead, you pay me, go ahead. So he takes a little vodka. And then he says to the wagon driver, you saved my life. I'm so appreciative. Can I pay for a couple of cups of vodka for yourself? The wagon driver said, sure, much appreciated. And he gives him some vodka. The vodka gets to both their souls. This Chassidic Jew starts to sing a warm, energetic Chassidic song, and the Russian peasant joins in the song. He also had a little chaim, and the two of them are singing this Chassidic song. Eventually, they arrive in Lubavitch, safe and sound. Our Chassidic Reb Velvel arrives at the big synagogue, and as is even today the custom that an older chassid comes, a lot of the younger chassidim gather around. They want to hear some words of inspiration, insight. And he says to them, let me tell you the following story and lesson that I learned. He tells them the story of his journey. And he says, this is the lesson that I learned. You could be surrounded by such abundance of vodka, but unless you ingest it and take it in sort of internally, it has no effect on you. Only when you take it in, you really internalize it, it impacts not only you, but it impacts those around you. It impacts the Russian peasant, the world around you. And he says, this is the lesson I've learned. You could be surrounded by Torah. And he says, especially Chassidus, vodka represented a higher standard of liquid over there in Russia, or drink. He says Chassidus is an even higher element of Torah, because Torah is compared to liquid, to water, as we find in the prophets. So he says vodka refers to the choicest part of Torah, which is the mystical part of Torah. He says you could be surrounded with such abundance of Torah, but unless you internalize it, you study it, you first ingest it and then internalize it on a personal level, it's not going to warm you. But once you do ingest it or drink it and internalize it, it doesn't only warm you, you are then inspired to give it to others and warm them as well. And I share this story because this week, is the week of the giving of the Torah. There is nothing more important for all of us to connect with Torah, to ingest, to drink, to internalize Torah. We live in a time that there is such abundance. There's barrels full of Torah. You could click on the internet, on YouTube, on social media, on Instagram, on TikTok, on whatever you want, wherever you want to go, Twitter. You could click on any site and you could get the deepest and the most abundant of the vodka of Torah, of the deepest insights of Torah. Often, unfortunately, we're surrounded on a more superficial level by so much of this abundance of Torah, of the beauty of God's words, but we don't ingest it. We don't drink it. We don't internalize it. In today's world, it's very cold out there. The cold, as in the Chassidic story, is so palpable. The coldness to holiness, the coldness, the opposition to having proper spiritual holy life is real. So just by being surrounded by barrels, just by having sort of a cultural connection to your Judaism, to your roots, is not enough. That's akin to being surrounded. So many of us are surrounded, we have some latkes, we have some gefilte fish. We have sort of a very superficial relationship with our Torah, which is so rich and vital for our life to survive the cold storm that's out there. The lesson from this Chassidic story, and the lesson from the Parsha this week, where God gives us the Torah, which means that there's an energy of a new giving of the Torah to each one of us, and that we can connect regardless of how much you've learned in the past, how much you know, how much you don't know. It's irrelevant. We just received the Torah. We're just standing at Mount Sinai, each one of us, this week. Take advantage of that. Don't allow the barrels of Torah to just be there and be satisfied with that. Go ahead and make sure to internalize. It is so important for all of us, for our children, for our grandchildren, to be a light unto the nations, to ourselves be revived. No matter if you are on the bottom in terms of your Torah connection, you're on the top. There's infinite depth that you could further connect yourself and revive yourself and give yourself life and warmth, and to those around you in our connection to Torah. So this is the week to make that resolution, every one of us on our own level. So that's what we're sharing today. Thank you very much for the opportunity for me to share a little cup of that spiritual sort of vodka. Today you got to be careful. I'm not encouraging you to drink. I'm not encouraging you to drink alcohol. I don't like alcohol. I'm not going to say I never say l'chaim, but I'm not, thank God, Baruch Hashem, I'm not a drinker. It's the analogy here, it's the parable here. Let me share with you a little bit. I thank you for allowing me to share and give the warmth and the beauty of Torah both to myself and to you. In turn, share that little cup, and hopefully that cup becomes a barrel to those that you're sharing with. Have a wonderful, fantastic, and blessed week. Yasher koach.